Yeah.
When we went to a pay platform, we were surprised at the reception of people like saying, "No, I'm willing to pay for
For
this."
this,
Yeah.
yeah. But some people that I was speaking to and I say, "Do you know what AI is?" Didn't know what AI is.
How much are they spending? When you ask those questions that reflect on their process, though you get a yes or no, and that's when you then begin to see your utility within their business.
Hello, my name is Chido, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Vambo AI. Welcome to our podcast, which is called Vambo AI in Africa. In this episode, we are in Zimbabwe and we are having a conversation with Valentine Muhamba, who is the founder and CEO of Dotzedw. So stay tuned and let's hear what he has to say about data in Southern Africa. Thank you so much, Valentine, for joining us for this episode of the Vambo AI in Africa podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Actually, we haven't spoken in a while. So I'm actually quite excited to have this conversation, to learn more about what you're building now. But before we do that, please can we let the guests know who you are and what you're currently building?
Okay. My name is Valentine Muhamba. I'm the CEO and founder of Dotzedw. We're a market insights and research consultancy firm. We work with all industries, so industry agnostic, and we help businesses build resilient products as well as understand their markets better. So this can be domestic or international markets.
And I know that data is a huge part of your business. Was that always kind of what you wanted to get into, or just by understanding the needs and the demands of the market, you started catering to that?
It was the only thing I wanted to get into at the beginning. The thing I ran into the most is I spoke to a lot of entrepreneurs in Southern Africa, and they'd be saying, "I need information on this, I need information on that," and we weren't able to give them that at my previous job. So I was like, "Okay, there's actually a problem here. People can't get the information that allows them to build more resilient businesses, or at the very least cater to present customer needs."
Yeah.
So I was like, "Okay, let's try that out and see what happens."
Okay, no, that's great. But before we get into kind of like some of the people you've served and the projects you've done, what is the data science space looking like in Africa? So where are people able to find talent for data science when they're trying to fit in a data scientist into their organization? Again, what does that look like? So again, I know a lot of people with the advent of AI are really looking to start doing something about it. And then they'll hear this term data science, data is the new gold. But how do you actually again find the talent and then structure your business to accommodate a data expert?
So we might be a little bit of an outlier in this because we actually train from within. We've got our own set courses and programs that we let people go through. That's because we've been burned before by looking for talent. This is not an indictment on Africa's data talent, not at all. It's more a case of we could not find the right fit.
Yeah.
So we then decided to bring people in who had some research experience or research qualification, and then work them through the data scientist or the data job tree. So data scientist, data engineer, whatever you want to be, whatever tickles your fancy, we can then accommodate that within. So we kind of not mold, but we kind of get what we wanted. You get what you want from us, if that makes sense.
That's very interesting that you say that because even for us, with some of our developers, we had to do something like that. Instead of getting someone who perhaps was trained in machine learning, we actually just took full stack developers who'd built other projects but had shown a keen interest in now pivoting into machine learning or AI. And I think we found that it was a bit easier because, again, they had an internal desire to get into this field. And I think that's important because this type of work is really hard. It's really, really technical and difficult. And if you can't see how it plays out in your personal career, it can be difficult to convince someone to do that. So, your internal training, what does that consist of? Are you giving people practical experience from day one, or is there a bit of theory to it? And also, what does that theory look like again for the African context?
So when you come in, we basically have an onboarding process. So if we're lucky enough to find someone who's already qualified in data science, that's great. It's a shorter process.
Yeah.
But if you're coming in as a researcher and want to get into data, it's an onboarding, and you typically start with the available courses, your Coursera courses, your what's it called? I forgot the Nigerian company that does courses, but we start you on off on a course. We've got a select number. And then once you get through that process, you then get into the work proper, which means you actually be doing most of the grunt work, getting familiar with data or data within the African context, because you get data sets from outside the continent that look fantastic,
Yeah,
but then in Africa, it's not the same sort of thing. So
Yeah.
we work people within the context, and then it's not just about the numbers, it's about what is the context and reference behind those numbers.
Yeah.
So why is it presenting in the way it's presenting? And do you have information that supports this data, or can you find information sources?
Mm.
So the next step is understanding that Africa's data is fragmented and not consolidated.
Mm.
So it's in so many places, and some of this data actually speaks to one another, but it never does.
Mm.
So beginning to learn about, for example, um, logistics in Southern Africa, and you're comparing Zambia and Zimbabwe. We share a border with a lot of similarities, but the factors either side of the border are different.
Mm.
So you can never judge or analyze unless you understand the underlying factors between the two countries or between the two markets.
And you mentioned numbers. Do you have a focus on quantitative data, or do you also collect some qualitative data?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Okay. I've read a couple of your articles. Really, really amazing stuff. You're sharing again the numbers that people don't know, or the numbers that people have been assuming are there, but didn't really quite have backing to say, this is how this industry is doing, or these are opportunities within this sector. How is the reception of the content that you're producing? Because I know that now you guys are taking the data, you're creating articles and pieces of information that people can consume. But then, yeah, what's the reception like?
It's been better than I thought, to be honest. I mean, when the platform was still free, I think we probably had like 2,000 concurrent users. And for us at the time when we started in 2022, it was like, oh, great, we've got people who are actually interested. So we're
Yes.
really hyped about that.
Yeah.
When we went to a pay platform, we were surprised at the reception of people like saying, no, I'm willing to pay for this.
Yeah.
Because you're not only consolidating data and getting sources from information we don't have access to, because that offline nature of Southern African data,
Yeah.
most of it is in physical records that you need to go through and then put online.
Yeah.
But more so the consolidation. I did not know that this would speak to this or this affects that.
Yeah.
So they were very happy to pay. We've got a very strong group of subscribers. And it's also in the way we visualize. So we understand not everyone is a data analyst, a statistician, or a mathematician. So we want to make sure that it's palatable, so you can easily see the trend to say, oh, this is what this means immediately. So there was a whole visual communication process we worked on for the past year and a half to make sure that we can communicate what we want to say clearly enough, you can understand the data clearly enough, and visually it's appealing, something that you're also willing to share with other people to be like, oh yeah, because word of mouth is the best form of marketing. So if you can vouch for us, it's great.
Yeah, no, Dotzedw have amazing infographics on a lot of the information that they're gathering and the things that they're coming to discover about the region and the continent. So again, we're in Zimbabwe. You're also from Zim, and your business started here, or rather your focus started here. What were some of the challenges that you faced when trying to gather this data, trying to kind of take it out? And were they the same challenges that you then saw when you expanded into the region, or things were a bit different going to South Africa, Zambia, so on and so forth?
I mean, you started off with the first challenge was finding talent. That was our initial first challenge. We didn't want to run in presumption. We wanted to be scientifically accurate and work with best practices.
Yeah.
So finding the right people then led us to building the system and model that we have of recruitment if we can't find the ideal person that we want to find. The second thing we found was building relationships with regulators and other people in our space. So in Zimbabwe, Zimstat, making sure they know who you are. Obviously, you understand their best practices if you're going to use their information, obviously referencing. The next thing was some of the investigations, predominantly in Zim, for digitally focused businesses haven't been conducted yet. These surveys are done by Zimstat or by organizations like NGOs and NPOs, right? So if there is no will or there's no, I don't want to call it a political agenda, whatever the case may be, an internal agenda to do that study, it won't be done. But again, that vacuum of information still remains. For example, on the concept of AI, how many developers or people in Zimbabwe are actively using AI in their daily lives? What are they using it for? What are the shortfalls they're seeing with AI from the African and Zimbabwean context? That's an investigation we're actually getting into in Q2 2025 to try and understand, okay, what's actually going on locally when it comes to AI. The third thing is, I want to say resources. It takes quite a lot of money to do what we do. This is one of the reasons why we put most of the deeper insights behind the paywall. So in most cases, if you really do support us, commit, because we what we're building is what we want to see in the world. We want to see more accessible information in the world about our region. Therefore, it takes money. Nothing comes for free. I think resources was a big challenge, but we've got fantastic subscribers, fantastic backers who've been helping us all the way. Regionally, competition is crazy regionally. Once you step out of Zimbabwe's borders, you begin to realize people actually are really serious about this. They understand the value, and it actually helped us change our pricing model for some of the services we offer, because we undersold a lot of stuff for a long period. When we were in South Africa particularly, they love what we do in terms of regionally, because some of our competition is mostly South Africa focused. But when we then started comparing and contrasting regions, they're like, okay, cool, this is actually pretty interesting. But they said, what's your price? And then they'll be like, oh, that's actually reasonable. And when someone sends you a
Because
deal,
then
you
you're like,
immediately, something's wrong. So we spoke to one of our competitors, like, no, you seriously undercharged for that. I know for your scale, you're making okay money, but for what it's actually worth for the time you've taken, I think you need to readjust your pricing. I think South Africa was, particularly Cape Town, was a big eye opener for us. Zambia as well, a lot of companies there that are doing really, really good work. Zambia is actually opening up to the world. In really interesting ways, particularly in terms of fintech. The people are pushing in very interesting directions. A lot of fantastic entrepreneurs, even Zimbabweans who've moved to Zambia to do business there. Namibia is the one that's been interesting for us because data in Namibia is crazy. There's like not a lot of information. Companies exist, but there's not a lot of companies have information about them, the Namibian market, and that's one of the sort of problems we're trying to solve this year. I mean, resources permitting.
Yes. Oh my goodness, there was so much information there. I didn't even know what to unpack first. But I think I'll start by saying, yes, South Africa it functions differently. I think, again, regional, we all know it functions differently on so many different levels. And I'm so glad that your exposure to that market has also then just helped you with your pricing for your business and how you're going to position yourself going further, right? Because yes, you conquer the Zim market, you want to be regional, but also continental, right? I'm sure that's part of your plans.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. So I want to ask, kind of next to understand now the AI side of things. One of the reasons why we really wanted to invite you to this conversation is one, because you are really well positioned in this data space, and data is really what drives the AI models and the solutions that we're building. So before we get into the data side, what kind of AI activity are you seeing in Zimbabwe? I have been seeing quite a few events, so I have an appreciation that, the community are interested in AI. They want to know what it is. They want to know how it can work. But it seems like it just kind of ends there. Like after there's this gathering and this discussion, unlike the other markets that I've been exposed to, where, I can probably name a number of AI startups on my hand. But yeah, I think perhaps maybe I'm just not well researched enough on the Zim market. But yeah, who's building AI at the moment? What does that really look like in Zim?
Uh, I wouldn't want to lie to you. I would say from developers, there's a lot of experimentation with AI. We've interfaced a number of software developers who are doing interesting things with AI. Again, I think it's learning what the latitude and longitude of the possibility of this within Africa looks like. I think people are still familiarizing themselves.
Yeah.
We've seen solutions like Ziwa AI that came out, I think it was 2021, 2022. That was another, again, building in public experimentation, what it would look like within the African context. But again, you have your powerhouse of ChatGPT, who obviously eclipsed that very quickly. But as a marker of what we can do as Africans, that was a fantastic case study. And I think that it being up still shows what's going on. I think in building products now, I think it's a lot of workflow things are being done in AI, at least from the developers.
So automation.
Yeah. Yeah, and even building code itself, people are testing out. I think Pamela from Pamtech
Yes.
tweeted out a couple of weeks ago that she actually had built something completely just through prompts. And that whole argument of if you are building software through prompts, are you a prompt engineer or a software engineer? But again, it's that experimentation that's great to see that all developers are interested in doing it. Products themselves, very few that I've seen at the very least that are probably go to market, because Zimbabwe is a space where people want to build in private and then launch, right? People don't typically want to, like what Vambo AI did everything in public. We saw from day one up until now what Vambo AI has been doing. But in most cases, people are building quietly and then they then launch their product later on. Maybe it's a fear of your ideas being stolen, whatever the case may be. But I think we're still very much in the experimentation, understanding what it means phase of AI in some.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you bring that point up, because I think for me as an entrepreneur, I have actually just accepted that if you're building an AI, you have to build in public. One, you're not just building this product for the market, you're also building yourself as an expert within this space. And right now, all our countries and our communities are looking for the experts, or at least someone who has tried it and failed. Even if you do fail, you have so much more to offer the communities that are looking to implement AI. So I know, from our journey personally, again, the building public thing wasn't like intentional, we're just doing what we're doing. But I know that from our journey, we have been able to be invited to, like, closed working groups on how AI can, or NLP can advance in Africa, right? And those opportunities wouldn't have come if we were not accessible, or if people didn't actually know that we existed.
Mm.
And again, at the time when those things came, it's not like we had a perfect product, but it gave us access to the communities that maybe had more data or more resources to give us, or a market that we could then explore and learn some more. So I really encourage everyone building AI to please build in public. Um, you don't have to tell everyone everything, but make sure that people know that you are working on something, and you never know who is willing to help and assist. Yeah. So, okay, cool. So you're saying people are kind of testing things out, developers are trying a couple of side projects. Is this kind of similar to the tech challenges that maybe previous startups had, where you've got really, really smart technical people that just aren't able to find the right match of a business-minded person to actually build a business out of these products?
It's a bit of both. I think it's that as well. I think there are a lot of talented developers who, like you
So,
mentioned, don't
yeah.
have a business mind. I also think that some developers assume they have a business mind, which is, I mean, some entrepreneurs like myself think we've got a technical mind, but then we meet the technical guys who tell us, no, no,
No,
no,
no.
relax. So it's about, I think it's that, as well as a lot of people in terms of developers or business people not looking to developers, or not saying, or thinking of developers as workhorses, to say, I'll contract you to do this, and then that's the end of it.
That's
And
it.
they don't think of product iteration, how you can develop. See.
Scalability, yeah.
So it's those little nickels that are still there in the market. There's a lot of, in my experience, I would say a lot of mistrust in Zim when it comes to building together. We've heard, cases where people, the fallout wasn't great, or people didn't work together very well, and then it became, we learned from observation where it became, okay, cool, do your things by yourself, and then launch what you need to launch. But there's so much value in collaboration. There's so much value you can do from leveraging perspective, because someone can immediately just change the way you saw your product, or see that you are thinking within certain limitations that you shouldn't be thinking within. And I think that's something we need to get over in terms of the Zim market.
Yeah, no, definitely. So part of my work here in Zim during this trip was to do some data collection, data validation, and really just speak to people on the ground and get a sense of where they're at with AI. Some of my results or learnings surprised me quite a bit. Um, I'll post one of the videos on our LinkedIn page, Vambo AI. Please follow it. But some people that I was speaking to, and I said, "Do you know what AI is?" Didn't know what AI is, and this was very different again to other African markets, where at least people they know that AI means artificial intelligence, and that's because that term and everything to do with it has been publicly, exposed or displayed, either through companies that they engage with often, or just social media and just different types of things. But yeah, I was really shocked that even like in Harare, in the capital city, some people didn't know what AI meant. And then going further, what is artificial intelligence? It wasn't until I had to give them an example to say, oh, you know that meta thing on your WhatsApp that's there now? But like, oh, do AI actual,
Yeah.
But what does it do? Like, I've just seen it, but what's its relevance? So for us as a company, it made us aware that there's a lot of work we also have to do to educate the market, just not even on our product, but first on this tool that we're using to give them a particular solution. So far, we'd been priming the market to our type of solution, but there's a bit of pre-work that we need to do there. Are those some insights that you're also seeing, maybe in Zim and also in the region? Do people actually know what AI is, or is it like a couple of us are like in our own world along with the West and leaving a lot of our brothers and sisters behind?
I think your scenario, yes, we've experienced similar, even regardless of AI, other industries. I'll give you an example that was used a while back when Bitcoin and crypto came into the public consciousness, particularly in Zim. People didn't know what it was, and then we had to explain it the company I was working for at the time explained it in a local context. It's simply just like EcoCash. It's EcoCash, but in this case, it's leveraged differently to the US dollar. That's essentially what it is. And I think those contextual examples, when you're explaining to people what you do, are like what you mentioned, the pre-work that needs to be done to get to a point where people then begin to understand what AI is. But from our perspective, yes, we've had issues with people not quite understanding, not essentially what we do, or understanding the data side of the world. Even when we get quite to AI, it's now a technical term. Maybe it's a fear of people trying to understand what things are, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, there are roadblocks there with people coming to base with what this can actually do, because it doesn't intersect with their daily lives. People or I don't like to say Zimbabwe is offline. It is very much online, but in very specific places or not in general places. So
Yeah.
the scope for you to be able to explore of these, if you can afford the data, is there. That's why the more technical people, people of more disposable income, can definitely explore these new concepts.
Yeah.
But on a general term, I mean, if I have my WhatsApp bundles and my Facebook bundles and I can
I'm
talk to my
good.
friends,
Yeah.
it is. And I think companies like Meta probably did a poor job at introducing people to their solution, because it would have been the AI that scaled in Africa,
Yes.
because
Everyone
see,
is on WhatsApp. Everyone is on Facebook.
yeah. And this is not to give Meta any, ideas. I think Vambo AI should be the one doing that. But in terms of them educating, they haven't taken the approach that you have to going down to the streets to asking people to actually understand the possibilities they can have with this thing.
Yeah.
It in the simplest terms, replaces search. It can give you responses. I know sometimes AI it hallucinates, but the models are getting so good
Much
now.
better, yeah.
So it's that the how does it solve this problem that I have day to day.
Yeah.
I think will connect with most people. And that's what we've seen in our line of work when we explain to them, particularly in business. Do you know where your customer is? How much are they spending? When you ask those questions that reflect on their process, though you get a yes or no, and that's when you then begin to see your utility within their business.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And for us, after that, okay, there's this AI thing. The next thing was, okay, I don't want to talk to you because I'm not confident enough to talk on this. I don't know what it is. And I'm like, it's fine. We want you to tell us that you don't know what it is, because we actually need to prove that again, I think sometimes in our communities we think, oh, everyone's talking about AI, so everyone must know about AI. But we still need to become sensitive, especially us as founders, people building solutions for Africa, that there's someone who you want to serve, who you want to use your product, that don't even know what this is. And you need to see them for who they are. So again, spoke to many people. One was like a Gen Z who had like a little corner store. Again, you'd expect him to know what AI is, but he's very well versed in TikTok. He knows about TikTok very well. Then we had a middle-aged lady who kind of like sold goods in quite a popular shopping center. She didn't know what AI was, but she was willing to learn, because she was like, if this can make me money, I'm gonna know what it does. And again, now you're starting to understand the motives behind people engaging with AI. It's not just, oh, this is the cool new trend. I also want to say, oh, I GPT'd that. Someone actually has something that is driving them behind this. And again, this is where business ideas are going to come from and ways that you're going to go to market. Then we spoke to an elderly gentleman whose grandchildren had actually introduced him to AI. So he was actually one of the people who knew about AI more than all of the other people that we'd spoken to. And it's because, the younger generation had introduced them to it, but they introduced them to it because he's got a farm and he's been struggling to understand some of the things that are happening on his farm. So he's got livestock, he's got plants, very good on the plant side, but the livestock, he was like, I don't know why my cows keep doing this thing. Ask ChatGPT, and it worked in that moment. So I would say or term him as a miracle believer, that he had one good interaction with it, and now he's like, I'm sold. This is going to be the only thing that I'm going to use. And again, different type of user, right? So when you then think of the types of products we can be building for Africa, and again, I really want to bring it down to Southern Africa. I want this conversation to focus on this region. Can you maybe give us maybe 3 or 4 types of businesses that if someone is watching and they're saying, look, I've been playing around with AI, I know how to build a basic model, or I know how to use an API and make something out of it. What should they be looking at? What should people be building right now for our region?
Tough question. But yeah, yeah, there are a lot of things that we've tinkered with internally as well that I didn't share because it's not something that we're willing to pursue right now. I think um, workflow management. People are doing things in work that they should not be doing. And let's start with marketing, for example. I know in the US and the UK, marketing is really big now with use of AI, but the models don't quite understand and I guess this is where Vambo AI solves that problem. The languages, the vernacular, how this sounds. Marketing is very, if you've noticed, is very English centric and so you get Shona sometimes and Devele sometimes. I know even in other companies are trying to be more inclusive of languages, but again, to find native speakers of those languages is a complicated endeavor. You need to go where there are, and I think there is a huge market there to give more contextual marketing because some communities feel like they don't feel part of what's going on in Zim because everything is in a language they have to learn, not a language that they grew up knowing. So I think in marketing that's probably pivotal. I think also in product design in some respects, like in essence, just looking up. I mean, these models learn from the entirety of the internet, looking up what people are interested in, what people are, moving. I know there's an Instagram channel I follow that essentially says copy this idea, right? Because someone somewhere else is doing it.
Yeah.
But to have an idea to ask, okay, what is a good business idea to launch in Zim? That'll be an interesting product, or someone who can get people to workflows for brainstorming for things like that. I think that'll be an interesting product. I think I only have two.
Nice.
Mm.
No, but those are really, really powerful. And I like the theme of what you're saying. Localization is key, right? Being able to build something that the people in your community can use and use on a daily basis. And again, I'm now kind of calling it like the first wave of tech startups, your fintechs, your edtechs, they were doing that.
Mm.
They were like, we want to solve payments in Lagos, in Nigeria right now. Actually, they would send something to Abuja or whatever the case is. And then they started expanding. But they found a problem that was in their community, got a solution that was localized and worked for their context, and then started expanding.
Mm.
And I think even now with your 4IR technologies, like saying your blockchain, your AI, your IoT, localization is going to be the best way to do it. And also, like you just said, these industries are very costly. You can't really afford to be like, I'm going for the world without actually first conquering one market that's going to be paying you from as early as day one.
Mm.
So localization is key. I think also to just contribute a few ideas, because sometimes I find I actually don't even contribute that much to these podcasts. I'm always wanting to learn. But I think some ideas to contribute to this is your line of work: data collection, data validation, data cleaning, literally just building a house that understands a particular set of data or sets of data really, really well. I'll give you an example. We work with a lot of data, of course. We've got 44 African languages, 20 from the global community, and are constantly even building within like the dialect level. So we work with a lot of data. And I remember we managed to kind of get one of these open source data sets. I won't mention which one. And it claimed to have quite a number of Bantu African languages. So obviously we were excited, like, oh my goodness, yes, this is going to really enhance our model. All of this data is going to be really great. When we started doing data cleaning, we actually noticed that the portion that was Bantu African languages was very, very small. There was a lot of Portuguese in there. There was a lot of, languages from, like your Caribbean countries, like your Patois, your Asian countries, like your Fiji, South Pacific, a lot of that. And that's when we actually came up with a new product, language identification. I don't think it was maliciously done, but I think people actually didn't know what African languages looked like or sounded like, that this data set just ended up having everything because maybe something has a similar language structure or something like that. So we then created a language identification tool where you can just put or speak any language and it tells you what it is. So right now, if I'd ask you, do you know what Amharic sounds like? Or do you know what Hausa sounds like? You may not, but Vambo AI definitely does. So anyway, we had to do that work, and it took us a really long time, like of our effort. And we said, if there was a company or someone who could outsource this work to, because it's an open source data set, so it's not like we're giving them anything proprietary. But if they could do that cleaning for us and then give us something that we can just immediately put into our model and train it, that would make our life so much easier. So I suggest if anyone is looking to start some type of business, anything within the data space right now, you'll be serving a lot of different industries and companies. So yes, coming back to Dotzedw, where is data going for your company? Like you just mentioned, you guys are doing a project in AI or some insights that are coming out around AI usage with data in the next quarter. Can't wait to see that. But yeah, where are you kind of seeing your company feeding into the AI ecosystem?
Like you mentioned, the data cleaning aspect, it's something we've already been doing, but doing for companies, agnostically, not specifically for AI, but it's something that we work on. Because there is a lot of information out there, and companies are collecting consciously or unconsciously a lot of information, but they're not getting to the point where they're cleaning it and structuring it in a way that it's easy for the analysts down the chain to be able to use. So yeah, that's predominantly what we've been doing presently. The second thing we're focusing on is bespoke investigation. So the data collection aspect that you mentioned, to say there are a lot of investigations that haven't been done, or there is no will to do them for whatever reason, agendas, etc. But we want to now start understanding from people doing business in Africa and Southern Africa to now say, okay, what are you curious about, particularly the digital focused businesses? What are you curious about the markets in Southern Africa? What do you want to know? And those will then drive us to now do those investigations on the ground research, not just secondary research. We'll actually be visiting some of these countries. We would understand, okay, cool, if in the financial services context, how does Malawi differ from the DRC or from Angola, from etc. Right? So we can get a better understanding because we've seen a lot of products being launched, not to throw shade, but Paystack, Flutterwave, and all those guys. One of the things that hampers them is regulation, the different regulations from port to port, something that we hope the Africa Continental Free Trade Area was able to solve. But we've realized the only universal language in finance or in fintech that Africa speaks is mobile money. And it was able to hit a very raw nerve. And it's really hard to do that again. Like it's really, really hard to hit a raw nerve twice. So these companies have been trying to figure their models within, areas where, yeah, we'll launch here doing this and then we'll see if it works or not. But again, as we say internally, information is the most important currency. So we want to get you closer to that answer. And if it's a 10% window that we're opening up for you, that's greater than the window that was open before. So that's the second thing we're trying to focus on. The third thing was more in terms of AI and machine learning, something in internal, because we're using internal tools for the past year and a half. But now we want to focus on more customer-facing tools, how you can access the repository of information we have, both open source and the stuff we've collected by ourselves, to ask and query questions about predominantly business. But that's not precluding us from working with companies like Vambo AI to be like, yo, you guys might have specific needs. Of course, we'll have to learn about what you guys need.
The niche and everything.
But the one thing I want to highlight is, and in as much as most African entrepreneurs work, we're not limited. It's not like we're trying to take on a lot. This is the process of learning. You learn what you can and cannot do through this process. So if you box yourself in and say, oh, I'm just going to do this, it won't necessarily work. Like the example you mentioned where the language identification tool was not the remit of Vambo AI. That's not what you were in to do, but you build something on top of those learnings. And I think that's a valuable lesson for people to learn as they're like building products and services.
Yeah, most definitely. So it would be really terrible for me to not address one of the elephants in the room, especially within the data space right now. Data ethics and good governance for data. If your face just changed, you're like, I know. I don't even know where to begin. First of all, what is the landscape looking like right now in terms of data ethics? I know that there have been a lot of debates and conversations around who owns the data, what can be done with it, what can be commercialized, how do we ensure that there's integrity within the data? So many different questions. So I think maybe just kind of start with what is prominent in your world, and then we'll take the conversation from there.
Prominent in my world is data with agenda. You'd get so when anyone walks into Dotzedw as an employee, the first thing we tell them is you can make data tell a story if you're really crafty enough. You can make trends look a certain way if you explain it in this way, right? So the one thing we've realized in the reports and the data we've been studying, collecting, and in the way we design our own research process is, what are we trying to achieve here? Right, that's the first question. The second question is, if we're looking at a data source, what were they trying to achieve? Because they might have been trying to highlight specific things that are irrelevant, probably maybe inaccurate, or too generalist for what we're trying to go for. So in our experience, that's been the biggest problem, getting to identify the agenda behind information. Of course, there's some valuable resources like the United Nations has got a vast data bank, the World Bank is a vast data bank. That is just agnostic. It's like, this is what's happening. And they leave the methodology and reasoning and whatnot and qualifiers beneath. So you can, okay, cool, this is what you're going for. Am I using this or not? Because we have an option of that order of data from the United Nations and World Bank, and then you have more localized data from local statistical agencies or local companies. Then you begin to realize they have another agenda. For example, they might not want the country to look as bad as it actually is. So when you benchmark them together, you're like, okay, cool, let's present both sides, since we don't have enough time to do the investigation ourselves, and present, yes, there is a discernible trend going on here. Here are the qualifiers. The data came from these two sources. And yeah, these guys have a very different view on what they're doing. And obviously you see that in the methodology that they publish after the data's out. And you begin to see, okay, there was definitely something going on here. They were looking for specific metrics. The questions weren't clear enough. I mean, we won't get into sampling and stuff like that because that's a whole different ballgame. But yeah, it's once you understand the methodology, you then understand the agenda, and then you understand whether this data is for you or not, or it's worth to put into the subset, but with just the qualifier of saying, yeah, there was an agenda behind this. And let's just be clear about that before we go forward.
Yeah. And in terms of then the primary data that you are collecting, do you compensate the people that are giving you this data? Do you just kind of play it by ear depending on what you're collecting exactly? Or is it data that you're willing to make open source as well? So then it's going to be used for the public good.
It depends. It's two cases. So if it's client work, it's part of the charge to compensate the focus groups and people that we use
Yes.
because we believe time is not free. Nothing in the world is free. Therefore,
Yeah.
someone must get some value from giving up or volunteering information.
Yeah.
If it's investigations we're doing like the survey about Zimbabwean developers, if we put out a link with like a Google, what's it called, Google form, whatever it is, right? It's going to be open source. Everyone can then leverage from that because we're like, yeah, we asked you, you gave up your time willingly, therefore the results will be
Everyone
open to you. Yeah, if it's something that we invested money in, for example, our Airbnb short-term rental market report, and since property is not such a big thing in the country, that took us 6 months and quite a bit of money. So we then said, okay, it's going to be priced at this amount if you want to purchase it. So it depends on it depends on what we're doing. So if it's open source and want this to benefit the ecosystem as a whole, it'll be free and voluntary application of voluntary disclosure of information. Client work, yeah, that's a different story.
That's a different story, of course. And as a regional kind of data company, which frameworks lead the work that you do? Do you kind of work like global frameworks? Do you focus on maybe frameworks that lead you in Zim and then just kind of adjust as you go into different markets?
So global frameworks, I know there are a lot of ISO standards, and we're in the process of certification of some of our processes to make it more, to show people that we're serious about what we do. Although the proof is in the pudding, we've not tooting my own horn, we've done good work.
They have done good work.
But we want to make sure that our processes are easily understandable, are verifiable, are using an international based source within Africa as well. The AFCFTA has done a lot of work conscientizing a lot of entrepreneurs to get these certifications, not just for what we do in our core business, but operations we have internally. Because in another vein, we're also a software development company, but very quietly. And we also have getting certifications in doing that as well. So we want to make sure we're meeting industry best practices and standards globally. And when we do finish the certifications, we'll be very happy to bandy them around and hopefully get us more clients.
More clients, yeah. No, good. So where is the world of data going in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see, obviously your company, but really where do you see Southern African data? Which spaces will it be playing in? Yeah, what does that look like in the near and far future?
I think our company and the space in Africa itself, Southern Africa, kind of answer each other in this sense. I think the most neglected aspect of Africa, of Southern Africa, has been the individual user. We know very little about the individual African, what they're doing. There are companies like Meta who have us everywhere, who probably have a better understanding. And I always say that Meta and Google understand Africa more than Africans themselves understand because they've been mapping on trends for decades at this point. For us, we're trying to get to understand the user on a contextual level. That's our direction. We know that the competition is stiff. Obviously, there are companies that have vastly greater resources than what we have, and with data sets that are vastly greater than what we have presently. But we believe that understanding the unit of the economy means you understand the economy better. And once these personas become visible and viable, it's easier for us now to translate this other order of information we've had. So the regional stuff, the context on the regional stuff will make sense when you now understand the users who are within the market for a number of disciplines. So for Africa, in terms of externally, in terms of the industry itself, I think again, the unit user, people are going to get more interested in understanding the African. Who's the African? What are they spending money on? Because we're going to be, if we're not still the youngest population in the world right now, we're growing at an alarming rate. We've got a number of resources that are available. Instead of taking resources out of the continent, as has been happening recently, people are going to come set up shop in Africa, as many companies have been doing of late. Amazon just came in South Africa, etc. So it shows a great amount of intent. But these companies come with one degree of understanding or another of what the market looks like. So that the big four make a lot of sense because they mirror their economies to where they're coming from. But the rest is a black box. And we've seen companies like, like Zambia, but
we're not going to touch that.
Yeah,
we don't know,
we don't know what's going on. So it's that unit user understanding, like the layers of, if you look at administrative layers from national level, regional, provincial level, council level, ward level, neighborhood level, domestic level, those layers are what we're trying to build now to give value back to the market. And I think that's where data is going, particularly in Africa.
Yeah, that's amazing. But yeah, as we close off, do you have any closing remarks for our viewers? Please do share some more words of wisdom.
I don't have words of wisdom, probably more admiration of what Vambo AI has been doing over the last years. It's been working first quietly at the very beginning. I think a few people knew about it, and then you brought it out as a fully fledged company, and you left a lot behind to the big risk. I respect that greatly because not many people in your position at the time would have changed course in the way they did. The bravery to build in public was fantastic. I think it showed a lot of people that it's not about stealing your idea, it's degree of execution. The ideas are a dime a dozen. It's can you actually follow through? And the team you built, I think, very interesting. Ishana is a great guy. I've always followed him on Twitter. And the platform itself, I mean, I have friends who say, oh no, what's AI and Africa? Give us a company. My first was go check out Vambo AI.
Thank you so much to you, Valentine, for joining us for this conversation. It was extremely insightful. We learned a lot, and our viewers learned a lot. But to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us as well. Please continue to stay tuned to the Vambo AI in Africa podcast. Like, share, and subscribe. Follow all our social media pages for Valentine's contact details and how to get in touch with Dotzedw, as well as for future episodes that are speaking about AI across the continent of Africa. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you next time.